Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a new video in the Under the Meta series, where I have a look at a deck that I think is very strong and has a lot of potential, but isn't quite top tier for whatever reason. So I'm going to be breaking down all the card choices, the weaknesses of the deck and how they could potentially be addressed going forwards, and then I've got some gameplay at the end so you guys can see the deck in action as well. Now, as usual, I'll have the importable deck list down in the description if you want to try the list out for yourself, and also if you enjoyed the alchemy video that I posted a few days ago, I've already put up a nearly 4,000 word in-depth deck guide article about that deck, which has a full sideboard and matchup guide as well as a bunch of extra details to help you play the deck. So if you want to get access to that, it's live now on my Patreon and you can get access to it from tier 1 and above. But anyway, let's just get straight into it. So this is my Bant Realmwarden Fear of Change list in Historic. So Fear of Change as an archetype is a relatively new innovation, and I want to give a shout out to Philip, who I believe was the originator of the idea. But if you've not seen it before, the namesake card Fear of Change does enable some very powerful openings in the deck. The main one being, if you play Disciple of Freyles as the land and then Earthbend it with Badgermole Cub, if you then target that Earthbent land with Fear of Change, you'll get a random 2-drop off the Fear of Change ability. Then Disciple of Freyles will re-enter as a 6-drop creature. It will get the ETB, and then you sacrifice the Fear of Change, which draws you 2 cards and gets you another trigger off it dying. And then you can exile the Disciple of Freyles to get a random 8-drop on the battlefield. And you can do this as early as turn 2 as well, because if you open with the Birds of Paradise or Noble Hierarch, and then you go Disciple of Freyles, Badgermole Cub, the Mana Dork still taps for green-blue, so you can set this up as early as turn 2, which is an incredibly powerful opening. And then Fear of Change also works pretty well with the warp creatures as well. You can warp in Quantum Riddler and then Fear of Change it to get a random 7-drop. And then additionally, because of Birthing Ritual, you can Birthing Ritual Quantum Riddler into a Disciple of Freyles to set up this synergy as well without even needing Badgermole Cub. So Fear of Change does enable some very powerful openings in the deck, which is a very interesting idea for sure. Now, I really like the core of this deck. I really like the idea behind it, but I did feel like most of the lists that I saw looked a little bit unfocused to me, right? They were running some interaction, but it couldn't be found with Birthing Ritual. They were running a bunch of one-offs, but only 2 Eldritch Evolution to find them, and also not that many Mana Dorks to be able to use with the Eldritch Evolution as well. So I did feel like the list could be streamlined. Now, initially, I started off by trying to combine it with the Simic Ritual list that I did relatively well with in the recent qualifier, trying to maximize getting Harbinger of the Seas down on turn 2 and scamming Abhorrent Oculus in play. And while I did like quite a lot of what that list was doing, I did really feel like it lacked good quality interaction, which does feel very important in the format right now. And so I definitely felt like it was worth splashing into white. And one game plan that I've really wanted to get to work for quite a while now feels like it synergizes incredibly well with the Fear of Change core in Stalwart Realmwarden, Skyclave Apparition, and Blink Effects. So Stalwart Realmwarden, this is an incredibly powerful card if you can consistently get it down on turn 2. So similar to the Simic list where I was trying to get Harbinger down on turn 2, and the Abzan Birthing Ritual deck where I was trying to get Archon of Myria down on 2. This list I feel like is still worth running the 10 Mana Dorks, but this time to get Stalwart Realmwarden down on turn 2, which is an incredibly powerful effect against a lot of the metagame right now, especially against some of the more difficult matchups for the Birthing Ritual decks, because I do feel like unless you can consistently get Archon of Myria down, you do tend to struggle against decks like Is It Phoenix and Ruby Storm, and Stalwart Realmwarden is excellent against both of those, right? If you get this on turn 2 against Is It Phoenix, they can't cast anything until turn 3, and especially against Ruby Storm, their entire deck is basically 2-drops, so if you do get this down on turn 2, even going second, they can't cast anything until they get their 4th land in play, which is incredibly powerful. Then there's obviously a ton of interactive decks in the format. Just most decks really rely on non-creatures as part of their proactive game plan, so getting this down on turn 2 really helps to disrupt that. And then if you can start blinking it with Felia, or Soul Herder is another card that I tried in this shell that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, then you can potentially lock those sorts of decks completely out of the game. And also, even against decks that do run creatures as well, like Dimir and Jund, you can basically lock them out of interacting and force them to just rely on their creatures to close out the rest of the game as well. So I really like Stalwart Realmwarden if you can consistently cast it on turn 2 and blink it, and I feel like it works really well with the Birthing Ritual Fear of Change plan, because you can also find it off Birthing Ritual, you can chain them together off Birthing Ritual, which does kind of the same thing as Failure and Realmwarden, right? Once you get 2 or 3 of these triggers, it does effectively lock people out of casting non-creature spells for the rest of the game, so it works very well with Birthing Ritual. And also you typically want to be running Quantum Riddler alongside Fear of Change, so getting to run Failure to not only blink your Realmwardens and your Apparitions, but also scam Riddler in play opens up your range of very powerful starts. So I feel like there's some really good crossover between these two game plans, and I also feel like I said, Realmwarden especially really helps to shore up a lot of the more difficult matchups for Birthing Ritual decks anyway. Like, a lot of the combo decks are non-creature based right now, and then I think one of the more difficult matchups for Birthing Ritual is the white-based control decks. Now again, these aren't as popular, but I have faced quite a lot of them on the ladder recently, and decks that do run Wrath of the Skies and Farewell, and even cards like Supreme Verdict are very brutal for your deck to deal with. So getting Stalwart Realmwarden down and blinking it, or scamming multiples in play off Birthing Ritual, really helps to shore up the majority of difficult matchups for the Birthing Ritual decks as well. So next up, I'm going to break down the individual card choices. So starting off at the 1-drop slot, we have 10 1-mana dorks here, which is very important to be able to consistently get Stalwart Realmwarden down on turn 2. Not only because we can obviously go turn 1 dork into turn 2 Realmwarden, but we can also go turn 1 dork into turn 2 Badgermole Cub into Birthing Ritual, and then potentially sack the Badgermole Cub to find Stalwart Realmwarden. So we have more ways to get Realmwarden in play, and 10 1-mana dorks has definitely felt the sweet spot to enable this more consistently. And then same sort of thing with Skyclave Apparition, right? Being able to get this down on turn 2 is also very important, because there are a lot of permanents that you want to be able to interact with early, right? If you're against Ruby Storm, you want to be able to hit their Ruby Medallion and Ral before they go off. If you're against Dimir, you want to be able to hit their Tamios and Psychic Frogs. Against Yawgmoth, you want to disrupt their early acceleration as well. So same sort of thing, getting Skyclave Apparition down on turn 2 is also a really good way to disrupt the opponent's proactive game plan. And then additionally, like I said, we do want to maximize our chances of doing the Fear of Change Disciple of Freyalise plan on turn 2. Now, unfortunately, Avacyn's Pilgrim doesn't enable this because it doesn't tap for blue, but considering we're running 2 double white cards in the main deck, I did feel like Avacyn's Pilgrim was the next best 1-mana dork to run, because I did feel like we wanted slightly more white sources to be able to cast these consistently on turn 2 as well. And then at the 2-drop slot, Felia has a lot of uses in this deck, right? It can be very effective to blink Realmwarden and Skyclave Apparition. It can obviously scam Riddler in play, but we can also use it to reuse Fear of Change over and over, right? If the opponent can't effectively block the Felia, we can use Felia to attack, blink Fear of Change, and just keep making whatever the biggest creature that we have in play bigger and bigger and bigger, and hopefully find a game-winning threat if we don't get lucky initially. And then it can also scam Disciple of Freyalise in play, right? If we don't have a Fear of Change and we've animated a Disciple of Freyalise with Badgermole Cub, we can blink it with Felia in order to get it to return as a creature if we just need more card draw. And it can obviously be used to blink opponent stuff as well. So if they do have like an ETB hate card like Torpor Orb, we can use Felia to temporarily get rid of it, use our ETBs during the main phase too. So Felia, very useful here in a number of ways. Then Badgermole Cub, obviously useful for the Disciple of Freyalise scam starts, but producing the extra mana enables some very explosive starts. It enables us to hardcast Quantum Riddler, it enables us to multi-spell in the same turn, and is also a good card to sacrifice to Birthing Ritual if we want to find our 3-drops as well. Then Birthing Ritual, kind of the centerpiece card of the deck, naturally gives you a good matchup against the interactive decks, helps you find your consistent cards more often, and especially is very good with Realmwarden. Like I said, you can scam multiple of these in play, you know, have a Realmwarden, make the opponent all their non-creatures cost 2 more, sacrifice it to another one, and then that does effectively lock them out of casting non-creatures for the rest of the game. So very, very powerful with Realmwarden. Very nice with Quantum Riddler as well, because we can obviously warp the Quantum Riddler, sack it to Birthing Ritual before it exiles, and then find another Riddler, or find a Disciple, or whatever else we hit off the top 6 as well. So Birthing Ritual, just the most powerful card in the deck, and one of the most powerful cards in the format as well. And Fear of Change kind of gone over this as well, but enables some very powerful proactive starts, and is probably the main way that we're going to be closing out the game, because obviously we can attack with Quantum Riddler and we can knock the opponent out with Stalwart Realmwarden, but in terms of actually applying pressure quickly, Fear of Change is generally the best way to do that, with the scam Disciple of Freyalise and scam Quantum Riddler starts as well. The Skyclave Apparition and Realmwarden kind of gone over these already. Quantum Riddler is just a generically powerful card, gives us more ways to grind against the more interactive decks, especially if we don't have Birthing Ritual. And it's just a good way to start applying pressure as well, right? 4/6 is a relatively big body, especially if you can start buffing it with Noble Hierarchs as well. And then Disciple of Freyalise, kind of gone over this one already as well, but very nice to scam into play, provides good card advantage, and very nice with the Fear of Change as well. Then in terms of the mana base, we are a 3-color deck with quite a lot of color requirements here, right? We need double white, we need blue consistently on turn 2, and we need green for the turn 1 dorks as well. So mostly fixing here. I do think running a couple of basics is still very important to play around the Boros list that are running stuff like Field of Ruin and Cleansing Wildfire. You still want to have at least 2 to be able to play through those sorts of lists as well. But for the most part, the mana base is largely fixing to just ensure that we have the colours consistently. Now, before I move on to the sideboard, I did want to quickly address a couple of cards that I did try in the list for quite a while, but they didn't end up making the cut in the end, in Soul Herder and Grizzled Huntmaster. So Soul Herder obviously fills a very similar role to Felia, but the big upside of Soul Herder is you don't need to attack to consistently get the blink off. So if you do manage to get a turn 2 Stalwart Realmwarden down. If you follow that up with a Soul Herder, you can consistently blink this without needing to attack in, which is a nice upside. But the big downside of this and Grizzled Huntmaster that I'll get onto in a second is that it just feels like it makes the curve of the deck really awkward, right? If you run more than 8 or even 10 3-drops in this deck, you become very reliant on your 1-mana dorks, which means you have to mulligan more, and it also makes the deck more vulnerable to spot removal and discard spells, because if your 1-mana dork does get killed before it gets to untap or discarded, you oftentimes don't have much to do before turn 3, which is just way too slow for Historic. And also, I did feel like against most decks, getting 2 Stalwart Realmwarden triggers is oftentimes enough to lock them out of casting non-creature spells for the rest of their game anyway. So even if the Fellier does die because you have to attack in with it, having the opponent have to play 4 more for the non-creature spells is usually good enough. So going for Soul Herder felt like a bit of overkill, but I generally felt like it caused just mana curve issues running too many 3-drops. And then same sort of thing with Huntmaster. I did really like what this did in the deck because it gave you access to a toolbox of cards. It made running Dorks and Disciple of Freyleys less costly because you have the option of turning them into a card from your sideboard, and being able to get main deck access to Archon of Emeria against the Storm decks, being able to get main deck Endurance and be able to evoke it immediately if you needed to is really nice. Being able to get access to Clarion Conqueror game 1 was also very nice against Yawgmoth, but same sort of thing with Soul Herder. I just felt like running a bunch of 3-drops makes you way too reliant on the 1-mana cards, and it just made the curve way too clunky. So these were interesting options, but for the mana curve and consistency of the deck, I much prefer the setup that we have right now. Then moving on to the sideboard, I still feel like Ruby Storm and Izzet Phoenix are the 2 most powerful proactive decks in the format, and outside of Realmwarden and occasionally Skyclave Apparition, we don't have that much to be able to stop them game 1, so I feel like we want a lot of Storm hate post sideboard, and so I'm bringing in 3 Deafening Silence and 4 Archon of Emeria. Archon of Emeria is especially good here because, similar to Stalwart Realmwarden and Skyclave Apparition, we can very consistently get this down on turn 2 off our Mana Dorks or Mana Dork into Badger Molcub into Birthing Ritual, which is really big. And then Deafening Silence, I did feel like I wanted a few extra of these effects, and Deafening Silence is slightly more difficult for the opponents to remove, especially against Phoenix because it can't get killed by Chain Lightning like Archon of Emeria can, but these really help to ensure that we have a good matchup post-sideboard against the 2 most powerful linear decks in the format. Then Clarion Conqueror is mainly here for Yawgmoth and Samwise. Yawgmoth in particular is a very tricky matchup game 1, and so getting access to Clarion Conqueror, which is just the best card in the matchup, is really nice. Now, having said that, this does obviously disrupt our own proactive game plan slightly because it does shut off our Mana Dorks, and is also particularly problematic with Badger Molcub because if we do Earthbind a land, then it's just completely ineffective because of Clarion Conqueror, so do be careful of these 2. But it hurts them way more than it hurts you. We can also sacrifice our 1-drops to Birthing Ritual and Fear of Change as well. And like I said, the matchup is very tricky, so I feel like it's worth dedicating a card to, and Clarion Conqueror just feels like the best card for the matchup, right? Unless they have Fatal Push with Revolt or Abrupt Decay, it basically shuts down their entire deck, really. And then 4 copies of Endurance is just generic Graveyard Hate, very good against the High Noon matchup, very good against Phoenix and Storm, gives us more coverage there, but I did feel like I wanted dedicated Graveyard Hate. The only change that I was thinking of making potentially is maybe trimming 2 Endurance to run 2 copies of Rest in Peace, just to give us some extra coverage against Samwise and especially Yawgmoth, because against Yawgmoth with Clarion Conqueror, you are pretty good at shutting off Yawgmoth itself and their combo side of the deck, but you can still sometimes lose to Marionette Apprentices draining you out, so Rest in Peace would provide extra coverage against that. But that does mean that you would then have fewer creatures for Birthing Ritual and fewer tools against the High Noon matchup, so still unsure about that, but if you did want to shore up the Yawgmoth matchup a little bit more, consider running a couple of copies of Rest in Peace instead of the Endurance. So then moving on to the weaknesses is very interesting because this deck was very close to getting a full deck guide video. I do think that this deck is very close to being top tier, but there are definitely a few things that are holding it back. So first of all, there's just inherent variance with Fear of Change, which is an issue when it's the main way that we're going to be looking to close out the game, right? Obviously, we can apply pressure with Quantum Riddler by scamming it into play, but for the most part, we're looking to get a big creature off Fear of Change and then use it to start applying pressure. And obviously, there's a ton of variance with this card. You can sometimes flip a Crater Hoof Behemoth and just win the game on the spot, but other times you'll hit a relatively low impact card and then give the opponent time to get back in the game, which is an issue. And this isn't really a fixable thing either. It's inherently part of the card, and it is a really fun card to play with, but it can be frustrating at times, especially if it is a matchup where you do really need to apply pressure quickly to stop the opponent drawing out of it. And then past that, I think the biggest issue with the deck is just that there are still some matchups that I don't really feel are fixable, that are relatively popular right now, which is a bit of an issue as well. So first of which is Yawgmoth. Like I said, you can potentially swap out Endurance for 2 copies of Rest in Peace, but I'm not sure how much it will really move the dial in the matchup. Game 1, it still feels like a pretty tricky matchup. Skyclave Apparition is good at disrupting their early game plan, but for the most part, they are pretty heavily favoured. Post-Sideboard Clarion Conqueror can make a real difference, but again, if you do have Clarion Conqueror down and you don't have a great proactive game plan alongside it, you can often die to them draining you out with Marionette Apprentices and Blood Artists and Sephiroths and stuff like that. And even if you do have it, they have Fatal Push, they have Abrupt Decay, they have ways to answer it as well. And like I said, you don't close the game out relatively quickly unless you get lucky or Fear of Change, and they're good at, just chump blocking your threats as well. So I do feel like Yawgmoth is an unfavourable matchup, and even if you do run Rest in Peace in the sideboard, I still don't think that will really fix it. So I don't think there's a great way to solve that matchup. I think the Eldrazi matchups are pretty bad. Now, having said that, traditional Eldrazi ramp hasn't been that popular, but the rise of fight rigging recently has been a bit of an issue as well, and I do feel like that's another matchup where you obviously do have some counterplay, right? Apparition and Realmwarden are good at stopping the proactive game plan of fight rigging if you can get it down early, but their top-end Eldrazi, you often give them time to get that sort of stuff off because you don't close the game out that quickly unless you get lucky or Fear of Change. And if you do face the traditional ramp variants, then it becomes much trickier because they have Ugin's Binding that can bounce your whole board. So again, that feels like a matchup where we don't really have great options to really improve there. We just have to hope that our interaction lines up well, which won't always happen. Valakut is another tricky matchup as well. Like I said, basically, the general core here is that the decks that punish you for not closing out the game quickly are naturally bad matchups. And whilst we do have good options for Valakut as well, right, we have Apparition to take out their Dryads and their Ice Tills and their One Rings, and Realmwarden can delay their early acceleration, right? If you are on the play and you do get a Realmwarden down, that can sometimes just lock the Valakut player out of the game. But if they get an Exploration down before you get your Realmwarden online, then it's tricky. They're a ramp deck, so Realmwarden won't really stop them going for Scapeshift unless you can loop it multiple times with Failure or Birthing Ritual. So again, you do have tools for the matchup, but I still feel like it's relatively unfavoured. Now you could say, oh, why don't you run Harbinger? But I feel like it's really tricky to do in a 3-colour deck like this. It hurts you more than it hurts them in a lot of the situations. And outside of that, there aren't really many other matchups where you would want to run Harbinger, right? You might say Harbinger would also help against Eldrazi, which is true, but it doesn't help very much against the fight rigging build, which feels like the most popular version of the deck as well. So I don't feel like it's worth dedicating slots for Harbinger, especially when you're running double white cards in the deck as well. So outside of that, I don't really feel like you have good options to fix that matchup either. And then finally, white-based control or mid-range. White-based control, in theory, shouldn't be a big part of the format because it's not very well positioned against a lot of the decks right now, but I have seen it a number of times recently, and Wrath of the Skies, Farewell are brutal cards against you, and then the white-based mid-range decks can also board into cards like Wrath of the Skies as well. Now again, Realmwarden can kind of lock that out, but it's another kind of weak spot of the deck. So I feel like, in summary, the main things that are holding it back from being top tier in my opinion, even though it is very close, is the inherent variance in Fear of Change and the natural weaknesses to Yawgmoth, Eldrazi, Valakut, and white-based control. If you have any suggestions for how to improve those matchups, definitely let me know in the comments. I'd love to discuss that with you. But that feels like the main things that are holding this deck back from being top tier as well. And also, obviously, it is vulnerable to ETB hate like Torpor Orb and Hushbringer and stuff like that as well. But having Failure in the deck definitely provides you some counterplay to that naturally. So anyway, that's the deck overall. Definitely let me know in the comments if you have any questions about the list at all. And next up, I've got some gameplay so you guys can see the deck in action. Either way though, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Big up! Okay, so we're on the play here. And wow, yeah, this hand looks excellent, right? We got Birds of Paradise on turn 1, Realmwarden on turn 2 on the play, which is great in basically every matchup, and then potentially Badgermaw Cub into Birthing Ritual the following turn, so very happy with this. We'll see what the opponent's on here. Okay, Elegant Parlor makes me think Ruby Storm, but they are also 81%, so could also be a Brew as well. Wow, Fear of Change off the top. Okay, this is pretty crazy. So we go Realmwarden on turn 2, and if they are on Ruby Storm, they're now not going to be able to cast anything other than Strike It Rich if they're running it. If they're running just 2 drops and above, they're not going to be able to cast anything until they hit their 4th land, which isn't a guarantee. You know, oftentimes they have to use Reckless Impulse to find it, if they even are on Ruby Storm. But now we can go Badgermaw Cub into Fear of Change into Birthing Ritual. So even if they're not on Ruby Storm, this is still going to be really difficult for them to beat. You know, the only thing that really beats it is a board sweeper, but now Realmwarden will delay that as well. So I'm just trying to think if we're tapping correctly. So yeah, I think that was right. Right, we go Badgermaw Cub, animate the Disciple. Then we can use the Birds of Paradise to go Fear of Change. We can use the Disciple mana to go Birthing Ritual. Just want to make sure that we don't get messed up by the auto tapper. So we'll lead on the Fear of Change, see what we hit. Okay, an Arthropod, and then sacrifice the Birthing Ritual, draw 2, and then see what 8-drop we get here. Oh, wow. Woodfall Primus. Okay, that's the biggest overkill we could have gotten there, I think. So, unfortunately, we didn't get to see what the opponent's on, but... So, I don't know if I'm going to over-sideboard here, right? If I knew that they were going to be on Ruby Storm, I would definitely be bringing in Archon and Endurance, but... Because we didn't see anything there, I'm just going to run it back. Which could be a little risky because Ruby Storm, just with our main deck configuration, we're pretty reliant on Realmwarden, like we saw there, or Skyclave Apparition to take out Ruby Medallion or Ral. Outside of that, they're typically pretty good at racing against us. But again, you know, Boros, there could be a variety of more fringe decks they could be running, so I don't want to board out of our proactive game plan for Archons and then be largely ineffective. So this hand, I mean, if they are on Ruby Storm, it is a little slow, but we still have Hierarch into Felia into Quantum Riddler. Oh, wow, okay. I was going to say, they are on Ruby Storm then if they've got Valakut Stoneforge, or sorry, Valakut Awakening, but now we've drawn the Realmwarden off the top. Unless they play Ruby Medallion here. Oh, they do, okay. So that then means that they can cast their 2-drops next turn. But they need the 3rd land drop for that to work, which again isn't a guarantee because Ruby Storm doesn't tend to run that many lands. Okay, they do have the 3rd land, unfortunately. And they do go for Artist Talent, okay. So here I think I'm going to go Birds of Paradise, attack, and then just go for Felia. Because if they don't combo off next turn, we can start blinking the Realmwarden. Could be a little bit awkward if they start... Oh, sorry, if they activate the Artist Talent, because then Ruby Medallion and Artist Talent will be able to get around Realmwarden. And obviously, because we didn't tax them this turn, they can just combo off here, potentially. And the Artist Talent is going to start, you know, filtering through their hand as well. So maybe I should have just taken a punt that Boros, especially with Elegant Parlor, the only real played one is Ruby Storm. But on the ladder, you never know what people are running, really. So, but yeah, if we had Archon of Emeria and Endurance in, this matchup would be significantly easier, especially in combination with Realmwarden and Apparition. So yeah, I think there is a decent chance they might be able to combo off here, especially with this Artist Talent fixing their draws. But they do need another mana producer here, right? If they don't find one soon, they could fizzle out potentially, and then that will give us the opportunity to blink the Realmwarden. But yeah, we'll see what they do. Okay, another Reckless Impulse. Wow, they pitched Jesk as well, so that must mean they have another mana producer. I mean, we can deny them a single mana thanks to the Felia here, right? If they Jeska's Will, we can just play out the Felia and that will reduce the amount of mana they can get off it, but they still get a good amount. Okay, yeah, there's Poetic Ritual. So yeah, from this point, I would be very surprised if they don't win. They'd have to get incredibly unlucky from this point not to convert this into a win. And yeah, I'm basically just holding off till they Jesk as well. Okay, yeah, they go for the Jesk as well. We'll flash in the Felia now. We could potentially bluff Endurance, but I think if they do come off this turn, it's probably better off not making the opponent think that we're running Endurance, right? I'd much rather catch them by surprise in Game 3 if it does go to that. Okay, they got past In Flames. So that should be game, I think. Not sure whether to make them play it out or not. Because I'm pretty sure they've basically got a deterministic kill here. Yeah, I'm just going to scoop it up. But at least now we know what they're on, so we can sideboard in the Archons. Oh, if it'll let me. There we go. And the Endurances. And the Deafening Silences. And then I think I'm going to cut Apparition. And probably Quantum Riddlers as well. I don't know why the sideboard's being really weird here. Actually, thinking about it, I probably should cut the Felias and keep the Apparitions in. Or cut the Felia Quantum Riddler and keep an Apparition at the very least, because at least, you know, we can use Apparition to get rid of Ruby Medallion and Ral. I think this is good. I mean, we do lose a bit of top end. We do lose some card advantage, but I feel like Ruby Storm is a deck where if you keep them off the combo, their deck doesn't really do that much, so we shouldn't really need Quantum Riddler to win the long game, right? We should just be able to attack with our creatures. But yeah, I think I'm happy running it back like this. But yeah, we've definitely got a lot of tools here, right? Deafening Silence, Archon of Myria are our best cards. As you saw game 1, Stalwart Realmwarden can be brutal, especially when we're on the play. And then, oh wow, then Endurance as well. I'm going to keep this because, you know, turn 2 Archon is oftentimes good enough to solo the game. It forces them to have an answer, and most of the time that's a Fragment Reality, which could, you know, get us another threat to be able to apply more pressure with. But yeah, maybe we have so many sideboard cards in here that I meant to mulligan a 5-lander, but we'll see how this goes. We'd be pretty unlucky to keep drawing lands here because we don't have that high a land count, and we've got a lot of good draws as well. Right, a second piece would provide us with resilience against Fragment Reality, for example. Oh wow, okay, we find the Realmwarden. I'm going to prioritise that. The earlier you can Realmwarden, the better. That's why I'm running 10 mana dorks. And now they're in a situation where, you know, again, they don't have their 2-drop down already, so if they don't naturally have their 4th land, they literally can't do anything here. I guess if they had Fragment Reality, they can do it a turn earlier, but yeah, they pass it back. And we find the Deafening Silence as well. So even if they have a Brotherhood's End, which they couldn't cast before turn 5 anyway, now they would still be locked down by the Deafening Silence. So this matchup definitely gets better post-sideboard. And still, Realmwarden and Apparition can help us get their game 1 as well. So we'll just run out of the Birds of Paradise, attacking for 4. And now we just got them on a 3-turn clock. They can't cast anything until this turn, and that's assuming they have their 4th land, which is, yeah, a tough ask because they don't always have it. We draw the Endurance, which provides us even more cover. So yeah, we're definitely good here. And I don't think casting Endurance changes our clock. Maybe I'm supposed to cast it to play around a piece of removal, but they don't have any white mana here. And like I said, they kind of rely on their impulse effects to keep hitting land drops anyway. So I think I'm just going to hold on to the Endurance here in case they do have a crazy turn, but looks like the Stalwart Realmwarden's going to get there without even probably needing the Archon of Emeria. And then we can run out Birthing Ritual, see if we can get another Realmwarden. Oh, or another Archon, that also works. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up, so we got there, nice. Okay, so we're on the play here. And yeah, this hand looks great, right? We've got Birds of Paradise on 1, Realmwarden on 2, which should be good against basically every Lurrus deck, right? Especially if they're on Ruby Storm, that'll force them to naturally draw their 4th land against most builds. Against Dimir, it'll be good. Against Auras, it will stop them casting any Auras until they hit their 3rd land. And we have Apparition as well, so okay, looks like they're on Dimir, and no interaction turn 1 is huge. Now we can just jam the Realmwarden, and obviously they are running stuff like Consider and Thoughtseize, but they're not going to be able to cast any interaction until turn 3 at the very least. And we have Felia here to potentially blink it as well. And obviously Apparition, so if they do have a creature like a Psychic Frog, we can just run out Apparition to deal with it. Wow, they just scoop it up straight away. Okay, so post-sideboard against Dimir. Honestly, I'm tempted to just run it back. You know, you could consider Endurance to be able to play around counterspells more easily. And, you know, if they were running Snapcaster Mage, that would give you more coverage there. But I feel like the main deck is very well set up against Dimir already. Birthing Ritual is great. Quantum Riddler's great. Felia's great. You know, Realmwarden's good. Oh, Realmwarden can be potentially really good, like we saw there. Skyclave Apparition can answer their main threats. So I feel like the main deck is already very well set up against Dimir. I don't think we really need to make any changes. Obviously, being on the draw is going to be a little bit more tricky, but I feel like this is one of our better matchups naturally anyway, right? Because we have so many value tools. If we can sneak a Birthing Ritual in play before they can counter it, they don't really have any good ways to remove it, and it will just snowball advantage as well. This one, we don't have any green. Oh, wow, into a 1-lander. Yikes, we got to go again, I think. Going down to 4 is not good. I think we're just going to have to keep this and hope to go Felliot into Realmwarden. But yeah, not hitting any green lands and then just hitting a 1-land is pretty rough. Which is pretty awkward as well, because we do have 15 green lands in the deck, I believe. Wow, and they have a Thoughtseize to punish the Malta 4 as well. We do draw turn 1 play, but I think I'd prefer either a Birthing Ritual or a card that we can blink with Fellier and then just hope to draw another land here. Oh, okay, they push the Birds of Paradise. I'm not sure whether to go for Fellier now. The only thing we get punished by is Spell Snare, really. And I think I'd rather do it now rather than get hit by a Counterspell. Or I guess a Board Sweeper as well. Oh, wow, they have the Spell Snare. Okay. Everything's going wrong for us this game. Still going to play it out, though, because we still do have draws that can get us back into it. Right, Quantum Riddler would be great here. Birthing Ritual into a creature the following turn would also be great. And it looks like they're kind of tapping out here as well, so... Okay, we get to blank a Thoughtseize, so that's one card down from them. So Fear of Change, I'm just going to run it out. You know, you could make an argument to maybe hold it, but because we only have one green land, we can't really do that anyway. And we don't want to play into any more Thoughtseizes that they have as well. Okay, another Fear of Change. So, I mean, if we hit like a Ravenous Chupacabra here or something, that would be great. Okay, they have the Fatal Push, unfortunately. Yeah, sorry if you heard some noise a minute ago. I think my doorbell just went. My housemate's getting it. Okay, and Dismember as well. So that's a little bit rough. It does look like their interaction lined up pretty well against us, but this was a Malta 4 and they had a Thoughtseize as well. So I think I'll play it out a couple more turns because, again, Quantum Riddler off the top could get us straight back in the game. Right, if we go Quantum Riddler, draw 2, Birthing Ritual, that can get us straight back into it, but I'd be surprised if they don't have a counterspell, you know, within a turn or two, especially because they've drawn a lot here. Well, they do tap out again, but they do flow state, so, you know, fingers crossed we find something. Yikes. I think I'm just going to give it one more turn, because, again, warp Quantum Riddler into Birthing Ritual would potentially get us there. But yeah, if we don't draw exactly Quantum Riddler this turn, I think we don't really stand much of a chance. I guess Apparition could maybe get us there as well, but yeah, okay, I'm just going to scoop it up now. But having said that, we still did have out, and that was a Malta 4 into a turn 1 Thoughtseize as well. So that was obviously rough, but that shouldn't happen on average, I don't think. Right, we're running 15 green sources, so chance of not finding one in the opening hand is a little bit rough. Like, I think that happened twice there, right? So, yeah, going into game 3, especially on the play again, should give us the upper hand because, you know, as we saw game 1, turn 2, Stalwart Realmwarden can just solo the game in situations like that, so... So, obviously a big deal to be on the play. And, I mean, we do need to draw off the top for this hand to be effective, but I think I'm going to keep it because we do have so many good top decks here, right? Birthing Ritual, Fear of Change, Quantum Riddler, Stalwart Realmwarden, even Apparition if they have, you know, a turn 2 Psychic Frog is a good hit. And absolute worst case scenario, even if we do keep drawing more lands, we can just run out the Disciple of Freyalise to draw. So obviously we do need help off the top, but because I am a little worried about mulliganing too low into a Thoughtseize deck, I'm going to, you know, see how this plays out. I mean, okay, they do have the Thoughtseize, so I'm kind of glad I did, but I guess it is only a 4-of, so maybe I'm supposed to mulligan this, but again, we have really good setup that so many good top decks are great here. Right, Realmwarden's excellent. Oh, okay, another Disciple, interesting. But yeah, Birthing Ritual, Quantum Riddler, Stalwart Realmwarden. It's basically just lands and Mana Dorks that aren't great top decks here. And I'm going to blink the Birds of Paradise just to get an extra counter on Fellier during the end step. And then obviously going to hold the Disciple of Freyalise to hardcast here. Because we can attack him with the Fellier next turn, get it up to a 4-4, and then run out the Disciple of Freyalise to try and draw 4 here. Okay, they do run out Baleful Strix. Okay, they do tap out. I was going to say if they have Fatal Push, it's going to be a bit awkward here. Wow, okay, we're not drawing that well, but we can run out the Disciple here and draw 3, which seems reasonable to me. Oh, wow, okay, perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. Now we force them... Well, they kind of need 3 counterspells here for them to stop us, so they would need, you know, counterspell double Force of Negation. So yeah, even though we did have a few rough draws at the start, this is exactly the sort of thing we were looking for to try and pull ahead in this matchup. Okay, they Flow State 1 for 1, tap out of Counterspell mana, so yeah, I'd be shocked if we don't end up winning this one now. Okay, interesting. So I'm going to go Birthing Ritual twice into Quantum Riddler draw 2 and see what we find. But even this should be good enough to win the game on its own, I imagine. Okay, they do have Mystical Dispute, but double Birthing Ritual is excellent. I'm not going to attack him with the Disciple because we do want to be able to get 3 drops and above off this. Okay, we find a Realmwarden, that's great. I think we're going to go for that as a priority, even though, you know, you could make an argument for maybe getting the Tamiyo, but this is going to shut off a lot of their plays. And we still find an Apparition off the second one, so again, I'm not too worried about attacking in, especially when we don't really have much power in play, so I'm just going to take out the Tamiyo now, just in case they can potentially flip it, which could stop us attacking in. But yeah, now I feel like in a really good position. Wow, not drawing particularly well, but I'm going to get in for 1 damage with the Birds of Paradise. Obviously, I'd take this trade if they want to take it. And then just going to keep ticking up value off these Birthing Rituals here. Not playing to their counterspells. Another Realmwarden. So now this is going to stop them playing any counterspells, right? They need to pay 4 on top of whatever they would want to cast. Wow, and another one. Okay, this is sick because this is basically going to lock them out of any non-creature spells probably for the rest of the game, right? They would need a 1 mana card and 7 lands to be able to cast it at this point. So they're basically wholly reliant on cards like Psychic Frog, but we still have Apparition in the deck to be able to answer it. Wow, okay, we're not we're not drawing well off the top, but thankfully these 2 Birthing Rituals are just the best cards in this matchup, so okay, we could go for Felia, but I think I'm going to go for Badgermole because I do want to have another card that can get us 3 drops in case they have... Well, I guess since they can't really use removal, maybe I'm supposed to go for Felia there. And then we can start potentially blinking the Apparition or the Realmwarden. So I think that was probably a misplay on my part. If we had a Disciple in the mana base, then I think there's a good argument for going for Badgermole because we can scam in Fear of Change. But yeah, I think I should have got for Felia. Because we, you know, in this spot we could attack with Felia. Oh wow, okay, we finally got a good draw. But yeah, we could attack with Felia, blink the Skyclave, get rid of the Lurrus. Okay, there's another Realmwarden. So now they need 9 lands to be able to cast a 1 mana spell. And yeah, opponent just scoops it up, so we got there, nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And, I mean, this hand is super vulnerable to Thoughtseize, right? If they Thoughtseize away the Riddler, we're in trouble, but if they don't have Thoughtseize, then this is actually a pretty decent hand, right? We can run out all the mana dorks early and then use Quantum Riddler to kind of recoup the card advantage. So drawing another mana dork here isn't ideal. Okay, Troll of Khazad Doom is interesting. Maybe they're on the Hardened Academic deck. Oh, interesting. So I'm not sure what we're up against here. Could be Living End, could be some sort of Grixis reanimated deck, maybe. Either way, I'm just going to run out all the mana dorks, and then next turn we can potentially go Quantum Riddler draw 2 into Fear of Change, get a 7-drop, which seems pretty decent. And then obviously, depending on what we draw, we might be able to cast other stuff as well. Okay, interesting. So it looks like we are against Living End. So if they have the natural... okay, the fact we didn't get a Stomping Ground there is encouraging. If they have the natural Violent Outburst into Living End, then we're in trouble, obviously. But if we get an extra turn here, we can potentially get on the board. Oh, wow, they do shock in the land. That's an issue. That kind of telegraphs to me that they have the Violent Outburst, but there's not really much we can do to play around it, really. So I think I'm just going to warp the Riddler and hope to find maybe a birthing ritual could give us a chance to survive. Oh, I should have manually tapped. That was really stupid. The Avacyn's Pilgrims aren't really going to be doing much now. I mean, I guess we got lucky that we drew into Felia, but yeah, I definitely should have manually tapped the Avacyn's Pilgrims there. Because if we had drawn something like a birthing ritual, we would have really wanted to cast it now. Yeah, we'll see what 7-drop we get. If we can exile their graveyards, that would be ideal. Okay, we don't get to do that. We do get to draw a card at least, which should hopefully make surviving a living end slightly better. But maybe they don't have it, right? They could have more cyclers. They could have a studies. Okay, they do have a study, so but that doesn't really help either because now they can just go for violent outburst next turn. But against Living End, you usually are pretty unfavoured game 1. But post-sideboard, we obviously have the Endurance to shut off their graveyard, and we have Archon of Myria and Deafening Silence, which it looks like they're on a more all-in Violent Outburst build, where Archon of Myria and Deafening Silence should be very good at shutting off their combo as well. Okay, yeah, it looks like they're going to wait on the Violent Outburst. So I'm going to run out the Felia because, you know, I feel like it's important to try and bait it out early. I don't think there's really much of an advantage of holding on to the Felia here. Now, I think it's probably best to attack first because I feel like they kind of have to in response to the attack. But that will just leave us with 3 lands. I mean, we can go Badgermole Cub into Quantum Riddler. If we had a 4th land, we could go Quantum Riddler into Fear of Change, which would obviously be better, but we kind of need to bait them into using the Living End first, right? So I'll do this, I'll blink the Fear of Change. And I feel like they have to kind of do it now, right? I mean, they probably should have done it before the attack step because we do get to draw an extra card off the card that we conjured into play. So they do get the Living End off. And we can at least go Badgermole Cub into Quantum Riddler. We did draw another... I was going to say, if we drew an untapped land, that would be ideal, because then we could go Quantum Riddler Fear of Change, and there might be a 7-drop that could stabilize us here, but I think we just have to go for the Riddler here, hope to draw something good, and then, you know, try and stabilize next turn, because at least now... okay, not ideal. At least now, though, they can't Living End again, because we have a very full graveyard, unless they have Endurance, I guess, but it does look like they're on quite an all-in build, which I think should give us an edge post-sideboard. But yeah, game 1 against Living End is always going to be tricky. Okay, yeah, that's a lot of damage coming through. We don't really have any good blockers, right? We can't block the Troll, and both our other creatures have Trample, so can't really think of anything that will get us back into this game. You know, maybe if we drew another Quantum Riddler, we can go Quantum Riddler Fear of Change and then get like a Sire of 7 Deaths or something. But, you know, a lot needs to go right for that to happen. Okay, yeah, I don't think that's going to do it. I don't think there's anything we can really do here. I mean, we can play out the Quantum Riddler, but we just don't have enough blockers here. I guess we could try Fear of Change as well and just see what we hit. You know, maybe there's some 4-drop that I'm not thinking of that could save us here. But it's pretty unlikely, I think. I mean, maybe I'm supposed to go Apparition first and try and hit on 5-drop. Oh, I guess we can get Fear of Change back and go to a 6-drop. But I can't really think of a 6-drop that sweeps the board. Maybe like a Perforator Crocodile. I guess this is the fun with Fear of Change. You never know. They got Mirror Shell Crow. Okay. So I think that's it then. But like I said, post-sideboard, we do get way more tools, and all of them shut off basically their entire proactive game plan. So I think, obviously, we're going to cut the Apparition. I don't think Realmwarden's that great. I mean, maybe it is. I mean, we definitely want the Archon. We definitely want the Endurance. I think we probably want the Deafening Silences as well. It's tricky to say. I do want to keep the proactive game plan of the deck intact. So I'm just going to run it back like that. Actually, maybe that was bad because now we don't have much to blink with Failure. Maybe I'm supposed to keep in the Realmwardens and cut either the Felias or the Riddlers. And maybe I'm supposed to bring the Deafening Silence as well. I'm not 100% sure if I'm being honest. Yeah, I think I probably did sideboard badly there. I don't think the Felias particularly good post-sideboard if we cut the Apparitions and the Realmwardens. So this hand I'm going to keep because of the Endurance, right? Endurance is excellent in this matchup, especially if we evoke it. We not only get to shut off their graveyard in response to a living end, but we can also put Endurance in our yards to guarantee that we get something back off it as well. So I think, even though I typically like to play Badgermole Cub out early, I'm probably going to hold on to it if we don't draw another green card. Okay, we do draw another green card, but I think I still probably want to prioritize getting Fear of Change in play and maybe blinking it with Felia, right? If we can draw a 1-drop, that would be excellent because we can go Felia, play the 1-drop, Fear of Change, blink the Fear of Change and get another trigger and still have Endurance open as well. Quantum Riddler would also be a great draw here as well. Okay, we do find a 1-drop, and actually thinking about it, I should just go for the Badgermole Cub here, right? Because that gets us up the chain faster, right? So we can tap the Breeding Pool and the Thicket to go for Badgermole Cub, animate the Hallowed Fountain, go for Fear of Change, get a 4-drop, blink it, get a 6-drop, and then we still have Endurance that we can use at any time by exiling the Birds of Paradise here. Oh wow, and we happen to hit a creature that has Graveyard Hate tacked on. I mean, that's obviously good, but I don't think it's really necessary with the Endurance. So yeah, we'll blink the Fear of Change here. So yeah, Felia looking alright, but again, I'm not sure what the best way to sideboard is. Because the issue is, if they do sideboard into like a plan B of some sort, then cutting too much of our proactive game plan for cards like Deafening Silence could be an issue. Okay, just a 5/6 Vigilance Menace doesn't do anything else. But yeah, I definitely want to think post-sideboard, Realmwarden and Deafening Silence are the two cards that I think I might need to, or should have kept in, or brought in rather. Especially on the play, we could consider Realmwarden a little bit more, but you know, Felia is still nice with Fear of Change, still nice with Quantum Riddler. So yeah, not 100% sure. But either way, we are still applying pressure pretty quickly here. And I am going to hold the Hallowed Fountain back just in case we want to hardcast the Endurance, because it could make the difference between lethal or not. Right, obviously, if they do go for Living End, we want to evoke it so that we get it back from the graveyard, but depending on what we hit off the Fear of Change here, it might make the difference between being able to go for lethal this turn or having to wait an extra turn. Oh wow, we hit Sundering Titan. Okay, we got pretty good hits off the Fear of Change this game, but I think because of the Endurance, we did have most of it covered. Okay, so unfortunately we're going to have to sacrifice our Hallowed Fountain as well, right? Because Sundering Titan isn't a May. You have to pick every type of land if there's one available, but you know, we wipe out all their lands. I don't think that's going to matter too much. Okay, nice, we got there. So post-sideboard, I mean, I'm just going to run it back and see how it feels, because this is the first time I faced the matchup, but I think there is maybe an argument for Deafening Silence, there is maybe an argument for Realmwarden, especially on the play. Maybe going second last game, Realmwarden isn't as good, but, you know, just being able to delay studies, being able to delay Violent Outburst could be a big deal. But again, I'm not 100% sure whether the opponent's maybe running a backup game plan. So this hand, you know, especially against Living End, we have to mull, right? We need something that's going to stop their proactive game plan. And this hand, I'm not sure whether to put back a Manadork or an Archon here. I think I'm going to put back an Archon because there's a chance they have some sort of interaction. And also, as with last game, I want to be able to have a green card to hold to use with Endurance. Because Living End can run, and obviously, like I said, if they have a Dismember or something like that, having Birds of Paradise as an additional dork to just ensure that we have the mana to cast Archon does seem quite important to me. Okay, there's Overlord. So I guess that is somewhat of a backup plan, right? If we take a while to close the game out, then that can obviously just turn into a creature they can attack with, but hopefully we will be able to apply more pressure than that. Yeah, either way, definitely going to jam the Archon. Okay, Riddler's a great draw here. That gives us something good to use with the Felia that we can still do under Archon as well. But yeah, I feel pretty good about this spot, right? We have Archon that they need to deal with. If they do deal with it and they do go for Living End, we can evoke Endurance. And we have Failure Riddler as part of our proactive game plan. You know, this is the sort of thing that I was worried about cutting too much of the proactive game plan for. We won't have cards like Failure and Riddler together to be able to ensure that we pull ahead in terms of card advantage. Because if you give them too much time, their Overlords will come online. They can potentially hardcast their creatures as well. Okay, looks like opponents in the tank here. Pretty good sign they're playing tap lands at this point as well. And another Endurance. So I'm definitely going to attack him with the Archon here, get the Exalted boost, and then... I mean, I'm tempted to play the Birds of Paradise just to unlock a little bit more mana, and then we can obviously Failure during their turn, Riddler during ours, and then we still have a second Endurance to be able to evoke if we want. Which I think I'm going to do, because hands like this where we only have 2 actual lands, I think it's quite important to unlock mana a little bit, and because we have Archon in play, we don't really need to worry about Living End right now anyway, right? They could obviously draw into Twin Shot Sniper or Dismember, but getting access to more mana feels important. Oh wow, they just suspend Living End, okay. I mean, that obviously puts more pressure on us to actually close the game out, but I feel like we should be in a pretty good position to do that, especially because we're going to scam the Riddler into play here. And then I think I'm going to play the Thicket here because we can obviously... it's tricky to say. I think I'm actually going to play the Garden out because I do want to be able to hardcast the Endurance just to apply more pressure, especially now they've suspended. But you could maybe make the argument to play the Razor Verge, hold the Disciple, and then if we draw another green card, we have 2 Endurances to be able to evoke. But like I said, the pressure is on us to close the game out because the Overlord is going to be impending. The Living End is, you know, going to be hardcastable in a few turns. Okay, another over. So they didn't have an untapped land by the looks of things. So presumably we should just be good to go Endurance, right? Even if they have a Dismember, I don't think that's really going to help them at this point. So Endurance is not only going to shuffle back their entire graveyard in case they do manage to get Living End online, but that should be the difference between setting up lethal here and not having enough damage, right? Yeah, okay, opponent just keeps it up, so we got that, nice. Okay, we're on the play here. And yeah, I think we can keep this on the play. On the draw, this might be a little bit too slow, but we still got Ritual into Apparition, which seems pretty decent. Okay, looks like the opponent's on Yawgmoth, and I know Browning is a good player as well, so this could be a tough match. So I think because of that, I'm going to run out Badger Mole Cub. Just gives us access to more mana next turn, so we can potentially double spell. Right, we could go Birthing Ritual into Fear of Change, or Skyclave Apparition into something else if we draw it. Okay, definitely going to go for Skyclave here because we want to keep them off Yawgmoth next turn if we can. So we're going to exile the Hierarch, get in for 2, and then probably just play the Temple Garden tapped and just ship it back. And then next turn, if they play another Dork or, you know, another high impact card like a Birthing Ritual, we can go Apparition into our own Birthing Ritual, which would be great. Okay, Delighted Halfling into a 3rd land. So yeah, definitely going to be targeting the Delighted Halfling unless they play a Birthing Ritual here. Okay, and Blood Artist, interesting. So yeah, definitely going to use the Apparition here, take out the Halfling, because if they don't have a 4th land, this could cut them off Yawgmoth, which is absolutely huge, right? Yawgmoth is definitely the most problematic card in this matchup, unsurprisingly. And then we can run out the Birthing Rituals, see what we find. Not a great hit. I mean, I think I'll sack the land and get probably a Hierarch here, just so that we can get access to Exalted, maybe get in for a little bit more damage. But yeah, if they have land into Yawg, this could be rough. Okay, Ignoble Hierarch and Marionette Apprentice. So we still don't know if they've got Yawg or not. Oh, they do have 4th land. Okay, so I'm pretty sure they don't have Yawgmoth, or they probably would have just played land Yawgmoth there. So that's a really good sign. mean, maybe they could have Chord of Calling potentially, so getting Realmwarden might be useful here as well, but I think I'll Fear of Change the Skyclave Apparition and see what we find here. Start working our way up. Okay, that's a pretty bad hit. But we do have Birthing Ritual here, which we can obviously use to sack the Fear of Change and then hopefully go up to a 7-drop. Okay, we do find another Apparition, so I think we want to use that to take out the Blood Artist here, because if they don't have a Yawgmoth or a way to find it, our main worry here is them just draining us out with attacks. So I think I'm going to exile the Blood Artist first, because obviously that's going to drain us whenever we sacrifice stuff to Birthing Ritual. Okay, Warped Tusker, not a great hit either, but at least it has stats. And then again, because of what I said, I don't want them to drain us out, so we're going to Apparition away the Marionette Apprentice. And now even if they do find the Yawgmoth, they don't have good ways to close the game out at the very least, even though it would obviously still be a great draw. Okay, there's Badgermole card, Moment of Truth. If their last card's a Chord of Calling or Yawg, we'll find out here. Okay, wow. Don't have either of them. That's great. So now it just largely comes down to top decks, but we just happen to have 2 Birthing Rituals on the go as well. So I'm going to attack him with the Warped Tusker first. Again, we don't have to worry about being drained out because we've taken out both the Blood Artist and the Marionette Apprentice now. Okay, they just chump block. That's fine. And then we'll go Realmwarden, which doesn't do too much here because even if they have Chord of Calling, they'll still be able to use it. But if we can chain them together, we might, that might be useful. So here, I think I'll sack the Hierarch to get a Badgermole Cub. Just get another body in play, still accelerate. And then I think I'll sack the Tusker to get a Riddler, because then we get to draw 2. Hopefully just keep pulling further ahead. You just want to apply as much pressure as we can before the opponent gets an opportunity to land a Yawgmoth. And we drew a Failure off the top, which is very nice. We can potentially use that to blink Apparition or Realmwarden if we want to make Chord of Calling less of a good draw. Wow, okay, another Riddler's great. So we can go Ritual. We can warp in the Riddler and scam it into play with Failure, which is pretty nice. This draws us 3 cards. And then don't have enough mana to go for Realmwarden here, but we can still... Oh, we do actually, yeah. So we could shock this in if we wanted to. And yeah, I think I will go for that because we're just shutting down the number of good top decks they have. I think I'm going to attack him with these 3. I'm going to attack him with the Realmwarden as well, just to gain some life back. And I'm going to scam in the Riddler. There's maybe an argument to scamming in the Realmwarden. Blinking the Realmwarden with the Failure, just so that Chord of Calling isn't a good live top deck, but I feel like getting more pressure in play is pretty important here. Just to try and close the game out before they find a way to get to Yawg. Okay, so we get to take out Badgermole Cub. And then I'm hoping that we get to hit a Realmwarden off these 2 Birthing Ritual triggers, and then that will shut off, a lot of their good top decks. And we do find one straight away, perfect. So I think we'll just sack the Realmwarden, get another Realmwarden. And now Chord of Calling is not a good draw. They can still cast... Oh no, they can't even cast Birthing Ritual anymore because we've taken out the Badgermole Cub. And we get another Realmwarden. Okay, that should be it then. So their only good draw now really is Yawgmoth. Right, Chord is shut off. Birthing Ritual is shut off. Yawgmoth is the only card I can conceivably see that they can get back into the game with. They just ship it back. So, I mean, that could be a Chord of Calling that they just can't cast here, right? So, what are we attacking with everything here? I mean, I don't have to play around Chord, really, because they just don't have enough mana to use it. So, yeah, I think I'm just going to send in with everything, and they're just forced into unfavourable blocks. Right, we're putting them down to 3 in the air via the Quantum Riddlers anyway. And then this should hopefully clear out their board to mean that even if they do happen to draw a Yawgmoth off the top, it's not really going to be effective anymore. Now, having said that, it does obviously look good how this game has gone, but it's largely because the opponent just didn't have a way to get to Yawg, right? If they had a Chord of Calling or a Yawgmoth, this game would be playing out quite differently, but getting to steal game 1 against Yawg is absolutely huge, because this is one of your trickier matchups. So we put them down to 1, we wipe out basically all of their creatures other than the Apparition tokens, and then I think we might as well go for the Disciple here, just to draw some cards, gain us a bit more life back, and then that's obviously good fuel for our Birthing Rituals as well. Okay, they drew a Seiju, interesting. So we can just get a Forest for our Hierarch. think we'll sacrifice the Realmwarden. And then we'll go for the Hierarch. And that should be good. I can't really think of anything they could run that would get them back in the game now. Okay, we found a Fear of Change. So we can now go Fear of Change, get an 8-drop by exiling the Disciple. See what we find. And then, I mean, that does have Trample. I think we probably should keep that around. So instead, I think I'll just... could sack a Quantum Riddler to draw one, you know, get another one in play. But I think I'll just sacrifice the Birds of Paradise, get another Fear of Change, and probably exile the Badgermole Cub, get a 4-drop. And yeah, I imagine that's it. I think we'll just send in with everything. Right, there's nothing they can really have here to save them, I don't think. Okay, yeah, getting game 1 against Yawgmoth is really big. Now, post-sideboard, Clarion Conqueror is the most important card. They're going to cut the Realmwardens because, you know, they don't run that many non-creatures. It's only really Birthing Ritual and Chord of Calling. I mean, I guess they're likely to bring in Fatal Push and Abrupt Decay against us to give them ways to answer Clarion Conqueror, but they might not even know that we're on Clarion Conqueror, right? We are running a decent number of mana dorks, so you might think, oh, that... You know, it's not going to synergize well with your proactive game plan, so you might not. But yeah, Yawgmoth in general, like I said, getting game 1 is really big because had they had a Yawgmoth or a Chord of Calling before we started, you know, chaining together Realmwarden triggers, is very difficult to beat. Right, they can obviously slow down our proactive game plan a lot, keep our creatures off the board, and then help them draw into the combo, right? One of the big weaknesses of this deck is it does take a while to close the game out, unless you happen to get fortunate with Fear of Change. You know, that's the big advantage of Fear of Change. It does enable you to sometimes hit a big trample creature or a creature that can apply pressure very quickly, which then does enable you to turn the corner very quickly. But if you get unlucky with your hits, or you don't find Fear of Change early on, or you don't have a good synergy draw with it, then you do take a while to close the game out, which is awkward against a deck like Yawgmoth that just naturally wins the long game and is good against creature decks as well. But like I said, Clarion Conqueror is excellent in this matchup. It just largely comes down to whether you find it and whether the opponent has the right counterplay, right? If they have Revolt into Fatal Push or Abrupt Decay, then it can be tricky. Okay, so opponent has Badgermole Cub. I think we'll just go for Birthing Ritual into Birds of Paradise. I want to try and get to Clarion Conqueror as quickly as possible, so I'm hoping we can go 1 into 2 and then potentially 2 into 3 next turn. And this will take out both of our mana dorks here, but I think it's still worth going for Fear of Change. And then if we do find a Clarion Conqueror off the Birthing Ritual next turn, we can go up to a 5-drop. You know, we can sack the Fear of Change, get Clarion Conqueror, and then get a 5-drop. But you do need to be wary that Fear of Change isn't a May. So if you do go Fear of Change into Clarion Conqueror and you don't have any other creatures, the death trigger will immediately exile the Clarion Conqueror. So you do need to be wary of that. But yeah, my hope here is just use Birthing Ritual to get to Clarion Conqueror, and then once that's in play, the match basically comes down to, do they have an answer, or are they able to drain us out, basically. Because Conqueror is great against their mana dorks, it's great against Yawgmoth, shuts off a number of their activated abilities, so yeah, the matchup does definitely revolve around that quite heavily. Another card that I've been thinking about making room for in this sideboard is Rest in Peace, because the main thing you can lose to, even if you do get to stick a Clarion Conqueror, is you can potentially lose to them just going wide and draining you out with Marionette Apprentices and Blood Artists and stuff like that. And Rest in Peace not only helps out against that, but it also stops them comboing off, which is a pretty big deal as well. So that's a change that you could consider making. I'm going to attack in here because obviously losing a 4-drop wouldn't be great for the Fear of Change, but I'd be happy to take the trade with basically any of their creatures at the moment. And I'm going to hold the mana off to go for Felia next turn so that we can start blinking Fear of Change. Oh, yikes. Okay, that's pretty awkward because that's what I was hoping to use to get to Clarion Conqueror. I think we'll grab a Hallowed Fountain here just to cover our colours a little bit better. But yeah, that's tricky because now we don't have a good way to stop their proactive game plan, and their proactive game plan definitely tends to go over the top of ours, especially if they have early access to Yawgmoth. Okay, there's Marionette Apprentice. They still have 4 mana for Yawg if they do have it, though. And there is the Yawgmoth, so You know, this is the sort of dynamic that I was worried about game one. Thankfully, they didn't have the Yawgmoth. So yeah, maybe it is worth dedicating more sideboard slots for stuff like Rest in Peace. But again, I don't know how much that would really meaningfully improve the matchup. Right, it does stop the drain abilities, and it does stop them comboing off. But Yawgmoth draws so many cards that they can pretty naturally just draw into a Chord of Calling, which they can then use to get Haywire Might to answer it as well. So I'm not sure it's worth making your other matchups worse. You know, Endurance is really good at helping the High Noon matchup as well, and it makes Birthing Ritual generally better, so I'm not sure how much it would really move the dial in the matchup. So here, I think I might just have to throw away the Failure to try and blink Fear of Change. Okay, they're not even going to let me get to the attack step, which does make sense. So yeah, my hope here is that we can use Fear of Change to find a way to remove the Yawgmoth. Right, like a Ravenous Chupacabra style effect. Or even better, maybe like a Perforator Crocodile if we're going for... Oh no, I guess it's a 3 to 5, not a 4 to 6, but... There are some hits that can get us back in the game, but again, this is kind of the awkward thing about it. In situations like this, in bad matchups, you just have to pray that you get very lucky with Fear of Change. We could attack with a Death Touch creature, but I actually think that would be bad for us if they take the trade with Badgermole Cub, because our only real hope here is finding a creature off Fear of Change that can kill the Yorg. And I think I'll lead on it, just in case we get a creature with a mana ability. You know, the difference between 2 and 3 mana could make a difference. Just gain 3 life isn't good enough, unfortunately. So yeah, I think we're unlikely to win this one now. Unless they've just drawn blank and we happen to draw a Clarion Conqueror off the top. Because now they have all the time in the world to try to try and assemble the combo. They can obviously pick apart our board if they want to as well, so... Yeah, this is you know, as opposed to game one, how the matchup has tended to go on in testing so far. But obviously, if we had Clarion Conqueror here, that would make a massive difference. So that's why I say it's just the most important card in the matchup. Okay, there's Sephiroth, so if they can find Young Wolf here, it's likely over, because they just have they basically have as many Yorg activations as they want. Now they have a Sephiroth in play. They can obviously flip the Sephiroth into the Flyer as well. So yeah, not looking good. Wow, they do just use a Fatal Push straight away. So that means that they, if we do draw Clarion Conqueror off the top here, we might have a chance of surviving, because they've used one of their few pieces of removal that can actually answer it. I guess they could also have Crawl Harpooner or Grist as outs, but... Again, that tends to rely more on Chord of Calling. Okay, they did find a Young Wolf, so, I mean, I imagine that's game over now. They basically just have as many activations as they want. Wow, we do find a Riddler off the top. I mean, if we're not going to find a Clarion Conqueror, that's about the best draw that we could get, I think. Just trying to think whether we want to tap the starting town or hold it back. Yeah, if we can find a Clarion Conqueror here, we stand a chance. I mean, Birthing Ritual can get us there, potentially. So that was actually pretty decent. I think I'm attacking with the 3-3, because we do need to apply pressure here. Although, actually, that was stupid, because they can flip the Sephiroth at instant speed. Yeah, that was stupid. And also, they can turn Sephiroth into a Flyer. That was my bad. I shouldn't have done that. Okay, it looks like they could target our other creatures and flip the Sephiroth to block it here. But yeah, that was stupid, because now, presumably end step, they can flip the Sephiroth, attack in for 5, and that, in conjunction with the Sephiroth drain ability, is probably going to get there. Okay, yeah, we didn't find a Clarion Conqueror. I mean, we can go for Apparition here, but I've messed up, because now we try to exile the Yawgmoth. They'll presumably activate it at least a couple of times, flip the Sephiroth face up, and then... all they need to do is attack us in for the remaining 5 damage, so... Yeah, I think if I'd held the 3-3 back, I have a chance of surviving here if they don't happen to draw into a Yawgmoth, but it was always going to be tricky, right? I guess also, like I said, if I'd found a Clarion Conqueror off that last Birthing Ritual trigger, then we also stand a chance, but it is kind of frustrating how much this matchup revolves around resolving a Clarion Conqueror. So yeah, now I'm pretty much dead. I think if they just drain us to 5, they can just attack us in the air for lethal. So I definitely shouldn't have attacked him with the flyer. But like I said, even if I hadn't, I think there's a good chance we die here. And I also think there's a very good chance they'll be able to find either a Yawgmoth or another way. Oh wow, they stopped there. Interesting. I would have thought they'd just keep draining until 5 life is left. But it wouldn't surprise me if they've got a backup Yawgmoth, so that's a little bit unfortunate. But this is one of our trickier matchups, and we didn't find Clarion Conqueror there either. Right, if I'd found a Clarion Conqueror off that Birthing Ritual trigger, I actually think we've got a chance there, because they did fire off a Fatal Push at the end of their last turn, and they don't typically... well, Yawgmoth in general can't really afford to board in that much interaction, because it does dilute their proactive game plan. You know, typically it's a couple of Fatal Push and maybe a couple of Abrupt Decay, and that's kind of it. So, but yeah, going into Game 3... being on the play should make a difference, I think. And yeah, hopefully we just see Clarion Conqueror. That would make a big difference. I mean, I'm going to ship that one back, I think. Okay, we do have the Clarion Conqueror. That's huge. So I think I'm going to keep this, put back the Disciple, and then, even though we don't have a turn 1 play, we can go Birthing Ritual into Clarion Conqueror. I mean, maybe we should go for Riddler, because there's no chance we're going to be sacking the Conqueror to Birthing Ritual anyway, right? But yeah, I just really got to hope that they don't have a Fatal Push or an Abrupt Decay straight away here. And yeah, I do think I'm probably supposed to go for Birthing Ritual first, because then we can go Clarion Conqueror, shut off their activated abilities, and then go Quantum Riddler and be able to sack it to Birthing Ritual. I was really hoping they wouldn't have a Birthing Ritual of their own. I was going to say that is a way that they can get back into the game. If they're just reliant on Yawg and Chord of Calling, then Clarion Conqueror is really effective. And I was going to say Badgermole Cub's actually good for us, because if they animate a regular land, they can't activate that land at all anymore, whereas because they've animated a Vista, they now get 2 lands, right? They get the land, they search for the Vista and the Vista back itself as well, so bit unfortunate that they're still able to ramp even with the Conqueror. And then obviously we're not going to sack anything here. And then next time we can go Riddler, or we could get a backup Conqueror in play maybe. But Birthing Ritual does make me worry a little bit about their ability to drain us out, because if they do manage to get, you know, Marionette Apprentices or Blood Artist down, or Sephiroth as well is another tricky one, then they can potentially attack around us, because we don't have that much board presence right now, right? We have the Conqueror, we have a second Conqueror as backup, and then Riddler into Birthing Ritual can get us there, especially if we... okay, Chittering Illuminator is also kind of awkward. So it's a bit annoying they've drawn cards that enable them to play through Conqueror, but again, I still think we've got a good chance here, right? We've got their main game plan shut down. Even if they have spot removal, we do have the backup. So as long as we can fade an early Marionette Apprentice and Blood Artist, I do think we'll be alright. Okay. Spoke too soon. There's a Marionette Apprentice. I just got to hope they don't find these in multiples. Because as long as they don't drain us out, we will have, we will be able to go over the top of them if we keep their Yawgmoth shut down, which Clarion Conqueror is obviously very good at doing. Okay, gets a Hierarch, that's fine. And then even though I am worried about being drained out, I think I'm still going to shock this land in just to get Avacyn's Pilgrim in play, so that we have a creature that we're happy to use with Birthing Ritual. Like, I'd love to find a Badgermole Cub here, or I guess Fear of Change is awkward, because if we do it, we have to exile the Clarion Conqueror. So I'm not going to do that, because I do want to protect myself against Fatal Push or Abrupt Decay here. And then next time we can go Quantum Riddler, draw 2, Warp Quantum Riddler, draw 2, and then exile that to the Birthing Ritual. And then hopefully... oh no, they've got a second effect. I was going to say, hopefully if we can find an apparition to get rid of Marionette Apprentice and Blood Artist, then we should be able to lock the game down, but if they keep finding these drain effects in multiples, that is a way that they can get back in the game. I think I'm just going to throw the Avacyn's Pilgrim in front here. Obviously it's not great to lose it, but my life total is a very valuable resource. The main thing I'm worried about here is getting drained out, so I'd rather take 1 than 3, even if it means losing a creature here. Okay, another Badgermole Cub. Now, because they don't have a Vista, that will actually cut them off mana here. But we do obviously need to be wary of our life total. Okay, Failure is useful as a blocker. We can draw 2 here. And I think I'm just going to hold off. Whatever we hit off the Birthing Ritual, we can obviously sack the Riddler to get. Okay, we do find an Apparition. That's huge. So we can use that to take out the Blood Artist, and then we only really have to worry about the Marionette Apprentice here. So they have gone a lot wider than us, but we can ambush them with the Felio as long as they don't find another... Oh, come on. I was just about to say, as long as they don't find another drain effect here, I think we're good, but that might be too much. And yeah, the fact they found that off the Illuminator is pretty frustrating. But this is basically how you try and win the Yawg matchup. You get Clarion Conqueror down, and then you try and limit their drain effect, but they've managed to get 3 in pretty quickly. I think that might be lethal, right? With 2 Marionette Apprentices, I don't think there's much we can do about this. This is annoying though. If they hadn't had that second Apprentice, I do think we've got a good chance of stabilizing, because if we can find another Apparition, we can potentially stonewall their attacks, but I think this might be lethal no matter how we block, because every creature that dies is dealing us 2 damage, and we're at 9. They're attacking in with 5 creatures, so yeah, I think we have to block with everything, and then we're just dead to the Marionette Apprentices either way. But yeah, this hopefully highlights why it's a tricky matchup. Clarion Conqueror can definitely make a difference. It's just the opponent did happen to draw the cards that were good under Clarion Conqueror, but GG's either way.